3 months ago, Emma sat at her kitchen table facing a pile of unopened bills. The silence was heavy. Last month she'd missed rent. Again. Her bank balance read $12.34, and automatic overdraft fees had begun stacking up. She felt the weight of failure. Not because she was lazy or careless, but because she didn't understand money well enough to make it work for her. Little did she know, she was about to have one conversation that would change everything. For 2 years, Emma worked long hours at a marketing job that paid just enough. She lived paycheck to paycheck, yet constantly worried about money running out the moment it came in. Her therapist had told her that anxiety might ease when she got her finances together, but every time she tried to make a budget, her expenses ballooned back. She had tried saving, tried cutting back, but little leaks, like extra takeout meals, impulse buys, or emotional spending, always drained her bank account. It was a vicious cycle. Anxiety leads to overspending, then regret, and then it all just repeats. She felt stuck, responsible but failing, and it felt hopeless. One evening, after another internal argument with her bank app, she walked past her friend David's house and noticed his porch light was still on. David, her old college roommate, had always been good with money. Even in college, he'd managed rent and groceries while she struggled. In a moment of desperation, Emma knocked on his door. He answered, surprise in his eyes. She stepped inside, took a shaky breath, and said, "I'm collapsing under money stress. I need help." David didn't judge. He just sat her down with a cup of tea. And then he said 4 words that stopped her cold. "You're thinking about money all wrong." The next day, as the rain tapped softly against the cafe windows, Emma sat across from David, her old college friend. He looked relaxed, not flashy or showy, but peaceful, content in a way that caught her off guard. After some catching up, she finally blurted out, "David, how did you do it? How are you not panicking about the future like the rest of us?" David took a sip of his coffee and gave her a knowing smile. Then, instead of diving into a pitch or a checklist of financial strategies, he reached into his weathered leather satchel and pulled out a tiny notebook, faded cover, corners bent. Inside were scribbles, quotes, and thoughts, more like journal entries than formulas. "This changed the way I think," he said. Emma tilted her head. "Is this yours?" He chuckled. "Some of it, but really it's a mix of ideas I picked up from a book that changed everything for me. Not in a get-rich kind of way, but in a stop-feeling-broken kind of way." He flipped to a page where he'd written one phrase over and over again. "It's not about being right, it's about being reasonable." That sentence hung in the air. "I used to think I was terrible with money," David continued, "like I was just destined to always feel behind. But the truth is, no one really learns this stuff properly growing up. And we all make decisions based on our emotions, our upbringing, our fears, not spreadsheets." Emma nodded slowly, feeling seen in a way she hadn't expected. "You know," he said, "most of us don't need more money tips. We need less shame, less pressure to beat the market, and more awareness of what actually makes us feel secure. The book that started all this for me, it just planted a seed, a new way of seeing money." Emma looked down at the notebook again, and for the first time in a while, she didn't feel judged. She felt curious. And that was the beginning, not a breakthrough moment, not a magic bullet, just a tiny shift in perspective. Over the next hour, David shared 3 insights he'd learned that totally changed his financial life. First, he said, save for reasons, not rules. He explained that mindless budgeting just wasn't enough. Instead, you should start with a reason. Maybe it's an emergency fund, a travel goal, or just peace of mind. That reason anchors the discipline. Without it, saving always felt pointless for Emma. Second, wealth is what you don't see. David described how the real signs of prosperity weren't flashy cars or fancy vacations, but stability, the money in the bank, the investments quietly growing in the background. He emphasized that true wealth is about underselling your lifestyle, not overspending on it. And finally, time beats timing. He didn't talk about flashy investments or get-rich-quick schemes. He talked about being consistent, small savings every month, letting compound interest work, and having patience over decades. He said, it's not about predicting the best moment, it's about being in the game long enough. So Emma spent that weekend writing out her goals. She wanted an emergency cushion of $3,000 and a college fund for her niece, $5,000. She cut back from weekly takeout to bi-weekly. She set up an automatic transfer of $100 to savings every payday. And, most radical of all, she started a $5 joy jar. Every time she saved, she'd drop $5 in an envelope just to redeem for herself later. Early success arrived as a surprise. Within 2 weeks, she had $800 saved, enough to cover the overdraft fees she'd been paying. That small success was a real spark of hope. The next month, Emma faced something that would have totally stressed her out before. Her car needed maintenance. But instead of panicking, she paid for it from her cushion. No anxiety, no fee, no sleepless nights. That sense of relief was honestly transformative. Then came 3 months with no overdrafts. Then her savings passed the $2,000 mark. It didn't feel like magic. It felt like discipline with a purpose. She realized 2 powerful truths. Saving is emotional, not logical. People don't save because they have money. They save because they have hope. Wealth is a lagging indicator, not something you broadcast. The real payoff is peace of mind. Her mindset had shifted. She no longer dreaded those bank notifications. She was the one in control. That notebook and those insights? Emma finally asked, "What's the book that taught this?" David smiled and held up a worn paperback. The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. It wasn't a financial textbook. It wasn't about stocks or markets. It was about people, their stories, their choices, their flawed beliefs, and it offered a new way to think about money for real life. Morgan Housel isn't your typical finance guy. He's not throwing spreadsheets at you or talking in complicated jargon you'd need a PhD to decode. He's a storyteller at heart, a writer who takes the big, confusing topic of money and turns it into something deeply human. What makes his work different is how real it feels. He doesn't focus on stock tips or get-rich-quick tricks. Instead, he talks about the why behind money, why we spend, save, fear, or obsess over it the way we do. He weaves personal stories, historical events, and quiet truths together in a way that just makes sense. It's not about sounding smart, it's about sounding honest. And that's what makes his book hit so hard. Because when someone puts words to the feelings you've had about money your whole life, but never quite knew how to explain, it sticks with you. And the best part? Morgan's not trying to impress anyone. He's just trying to help people see money for what it really is, a tool shaped by our emotions, habits, and stories. And once you understand that, your whole financial life can change. If you relate to Emma and feel like finances control you more than you control them, you don't need fancy strategies. You need clarity, patience, and compassion. Start with why you save, understand the stories behind your spending, and most importantly, give time a chance to do its work. Money is not math alone, it's personal, and that's what makes it powerful. If Emma's journey moved you, please like, share, and subscribe for more stories like this. Stories that give you a new way to think about money, mindset, and growth. Let me know in the comments. What's one money habit you want to change this month? Every week, we'll bring you a new story and a new book to help you grow financially and personally, one book at a time.